This week in comic books, we get Lazarus Planet #1 again, because right, and this one's dealing with the gods. So we're going god tier stuff, and how what you ask for, you may not always actually really want in reality. Over in the land of Marvels, Hellcat 1 came out, and man, I'm kind of excited about this, but it's going to be very dependent on something, and I want to share that with you, of course. And in the land of independence, we get this great comic book called No One, and Monarch 2 came out. I'm going to talk about those comic books and a bunch of other ones as quickly as I can for you. But first, if I can indulge you, please, let me do a sales pitch real quick on some coffee. Hey, you bunch of weirdos. You know, sometimes in life we just have to deal with things, even if we don't like it or want it. Like ordering french fries off of DoorDash and they come stale or soggy, or getting a steak that might be slightly undercooked or slightly overcooked, or worse, getting a bad haircut and finding out when it's too late. But you know what you don't have to compromise on? And that's coffee. Check out Coffee Brand Coffee. My link down below will save you some cash. And as always, check the reviews first of anything you purchase before you purchase it. Coffee Brand Coffee. It's just good coffee. All right, so let's get into this week's comic books. If you don't know, I'm Pocan Joe, and I read comic books, and I like to talk to you about them and the things that are in them, and maybe if there's any little nuggets of anything of interest. So let's jump right into this with Lazarus Planet #1. So this is great. So now we're dealing with the gods. The gods need people, and people don't necessarily need the gods in this because their gifts, the things that they can give you, the blessings can also be a curse. And we find that out immediately in the beginning of the story here, as mostly they're kind of focusing on the Greek gods. Should kind of point that out too, right? They're kind of focusing in that area and giving people gifts that actually turn into curses, right? Like being able to read somebody's mind. Being able to transform into something or along those lines. That sometimes we want things, right, without really understanding the ramifications of what we're asking for. And the worst case scenario in that is that you actually get it. Right? Because nobody thinks about the bad things from what they want. So this is interesting. We're kind of focusing on Wonder Woman, and she's like talking to the gods in this one about, hey, do we really want to go down this path with this war that you're trying to start up and all the disruption and everything you're doing? And of course, a sacrifice needs to be made in some course to resurrect the kind of whole scenario here, I think is the best way to put this. So what are we going to do? We're going to take a demigod like Wonder Woman, part person, part god, and we're just going to make her a full god. So again, with dealing what was in the beginning of the story, I wonder if that was a precursor into our next issues. I really hope it is. I'm really kind of excited about that. I always like stories where people want something and it turns out to be the worst case scenario. And we got a mysterious figure in the background kind of messing with Themyscira and that whole situation. What happens when the gods come down? They're like, we don't need Themyscira no more. That needs to go away. And they start making decisions and start running the jam up there, right? Now you're probably wondering, is Zeus all part of this if you haven't picked this up? No, he's dead. We have somebody else in charge now. And let's just say there's no fury like a woman scorned. You can ask my wife. Okay, so yeah, I'm digging this. I've been liking a lot of this Lazarus Planet stuff. Whether it's issue 1 or the follow-up side issues and storylines to it. I think it's very interesting, and it's definitely kind of rebooting the whole DC universe and how we perceive our characters now as we move forward. Nice segue into Justice Society of America. So I've said this before when I was reading this. This is issue #3. I think I always kind of preface it this. I've never been a Huntress fan. The character Huntress. It's just another character very similar to most female characters in DC comic books, especially around the Gotham type stuff, right? Like the Robins or along those lines. However, I'm slowly kind of jumping on board with this Huntress, who is really just the child of Batman and Catwoman there. And I like her role in it because she's not totally and utterly the focus of this thing. Especially when we're dealing with time jumps, there's a lot of other things going on than just some character trying to find their place in the world, right? That's a lot of world building that you got to kind of throw in there. So we get some 1940s action in here with some Sergeant Rock and the Unknown Soldier. If you don't know who the Unknown Soldier is, I have to ask if you even collect comic books like that. Is this the bandages, the helmet, the rough look to it? And then Sergeant Rock, with him just finishing his run, being kind of thrown into here as well. I'm really enjoying that. I like that kind of stuff. When you get older, I don't know, it's woodworking, smoking meats, or you become an expert on World War II. Welcome to middle-aged suburbanites, I guess, right? But to kind of focus it back around, so what we're doing here is we have a character who was a bad guy from World War II, mad scientist type, who figured out how to jump through time and things like that. And for some reason, he's not doing the typical trope where you just go in back in the past and you just kill the bad guy or kill the thing you don't like to make sure it never exists. He's doing something different in here that's a little odd. And right when he's about to monologue it, because all good villains monologue it, the issue ends. It just stops you right there. Like it was the most abrupt stop of all time in a comic book that I have read in a while. Like he's like, no, you guys don't have to worry about finding me. I'm right here to tell you exactly what I'm going to do, and it is go to black. I have to buy the next issue now. I have to know why this overly exaggerated, elaborated plan. Is it super genius? Is it stupid? Like, I don't know yet. And honestly, I just have to get the next book because I'm so curious why you're jumping through time doing the things that you're doing and just not dropping bodies along the way. Like, what is going on here? So, yeah, smart. It was smart. You got me. And you'll continue to get me because I've actually been enjoying this, bringing in the various characters from the Justice League Society from the Golden Age all the way up to current ones and even future ones in this case, like our character Huntress. She's from the future and she's dealing with the present, and then things are going on in the past. So we're kind of doing this beginning, middle, end type scenario here. And I like stories that are broken down in threes like that. All right, next. Hellcat #1. So normally I am not a fan. Of course, Scotty Young cover. My wife likes Scotty Young. I get Scotty Young, and if we get a comic book, we read a comic book. Normally, when I read a comic book, I'm not particularly interested in the sassy, abrupt, mean girl type attitude that can kind of come off with a female character in a comic book. Now, I'm not saying they all need to be damsels in distress as well. I kind of like a nice middle ground, and then there's some sort of moral message behind it. And this kind of started off with the girl that separation issues from her father, daddy issues. Let's just call it what it is, daddy issues. Daddy had walked out on Mama. Mama was a comic book writer, kind of used her name in the comic books to kind of push the narrative story. Yeah, comic book within a comic book. Tropey, I know, but... And now she's a ghost, which that just kind of struck me out of nowhere. And then the whole, I got into a fight, and apparently I jacked somebody up so bad that I'm in trouble, and then there's dating, boy issue things. Normally you're like, Pocan Joe, why did you finish reading this? This is obviously not your kind of comic book. I don't know. I'm absolutely enjoyed this, and even though it's not something it's for me, and I think it's because deep down inside, I think there is something that I'm like, hey, we may see, one of these type of characters who normally just goes about this way and is just annoying the entire time, or at least annoying to me. I keep feeling like as you read this and some of the things that are said and done in this, that we might actually see a character kind of mature and grow into something, and that's my hope. Right? I know hope's one of those flimsy words. It ranks right up there with if. But that's kind of my hope in this, because that's what I keep seeing in this. There's obviously some caring moments in here as we see her hanging out with Sleepwalker's alter ego, right? And there's something wrong with Sleepwalker in his kind of dimensional, sleepy, dream zone woo-woo place, right? Now, the solicitation said there was a cameo or a first appearance or something of a Sleepwalker team, right? And if they're talking about this, right, these kind of guys up here doing the thing, um, that doesn't really seem like a team to me. It seems like a bunch of people are passing judgment down on Sleepwalker, right? So I don't know. The solicitation was weird, but for all the normal faults that I would find in a comic book that reads like this, I actually enjoyed this one, which was surprising even to me. Because normally I'm like, it's garbage, but it wasn't. All right, next Yoda. So Yoda's going to deal with the racisms, right? This is most of these issue storylines in this book have been kind of dealing with that. Don't judge other people the way they look, which is a very strong and important thing. You shouldn't that's a bad thing to do. With that said, a certain level of situational awareness in an area, probably not the worst case scenario either. Well, all I'm saying is that there's always a happy middle ground, right? You shouldn't judge people for what they look like, but but you should judge their mannerisms. I think that's a better way to put that. But we're going to jump into this comic book now. So in here we get a Wookiee that kind of has a problem with one of those lizard races in Star Wars. Because in the past, right, their two civilizations or tribes, right, had a little kerfuffle, right, went to at each other a little bit, and for some reason, this one particular Wookiee is kind of seriously having a problem with this. But this lizard Jedi person is just trying to get through Jedi school and seems to be an okay student at it. So they're succeeding. So there's probably some jealousy involved. Which I'm just going to say on the down low for everybody out there. Most racisms that people have inside of them or prejudices are based off of other people's successes. It's really jealousy. And the fact that they hate them for whatever ridiculous reason. Right? It doesn't make sense to me. And I'm always extremely awkward when I talk about these subjects. So I'm sorry if I'm coming off kind of weird. I do apologize. But, it's what happened in the comic book, and we shouldn't shy away from such subjects. So that kind of happens in here. And, of course, the Wookiee goes to the worst person to get advice from, Count Dooku. You may remember him. He was the bad guy, right? But this is before, we knew he was the bad guy type of scenario. And gives him probably the worst advice ever. If you're getting visions, then you should act appropriately towards those visions. And, of course, we end the story with a major thing that looks like he's attacking her, which I hope is not the case. I hope it's just a quick twist of the story and there's some sort of thing that happens where they can work together. Probably not. It's going to be the thing, isn't it? It is. Okay. So going into Independence, we get I Hate Fairyland. I picked this up. I've met Scotty Young. I like Scotty Young. I like whimsical stuff that are kind of meta towards the whole fantasy and whimsical realm, but still keeping that artistic taste to it. And this definitely does. So they escape the maze, right? Because before they can get into Fairyland to go save the boss's kid and all that other stuff, they had to go through the maze thing, right? You probably remember that up to this point and just absolutely doing everything wrong. So she gets into Fairyland finally, has to leave her friends behind, goes in there, boss calls and says, "Oh, hey, I found my son. Sorry." And she's like, "Okay, well, I'm ready to come home." "Yeah, we can't do that because of legal reasons, very corporate." And so now she's stuck in Fairyland again. And then we get reintroduced to some characters that were prevalent in Volume 1 to her in Fairyland as well. Kind of a nice transition of story arc in here because now it's going to turn into a revenge story, right? Because the guy screwed her over. So now she's got to get revenge and even team up with her old friends and probably have to make amends there in some way, shape, or form. Oh, that's probably the highlight of the story. Oh, I hate apologizing myself. I'm not a fan of it. All right, moving on. Masters of the Universe, Masterverse. So this is going to take. If you know the story Job from the Bible, that's pretty much what's going to be happening here for a while in this book. So in this, how do you put it? The sorceress is talking to Zodak. Zodak's kind of the science, and of course the sorceress is the magical woo-woo, right? They're conversating about having all these other type of He-Man, right, and Prince Adams out there in their multiverse, if you will. And in this one, the sorceress makes the argument, hey, you shouldn't just trust the word of He-Man and his actions. Let's listen to some of the stories from some of the people he's worked with and been around. So they do that, right? And of course, it's all, flowers and kudos and all that, right? So Zodak's like, okay, this is great. Prince Adam, gets the power because he's a noble person, blah, blah, blah. But, that's because good things happen to him. He has supportive people around him. Let's make him suffer. Job, right? Story of Job. So now we get a cosmic being, sorcery woo woo, that's going to make a poor prince suffer to see if you still be a good person at the end of the day. And that's why the story of Job is such a good story, right? It's a little out there. I'll go with it, though. The stories in here that they kind of highlighted again are just Elseworld type stories. If you're a nostalgia over the He-Man and you read this, you may not recognize the stories in it, but you will definitely see all the characters that you like, even some of the vague ones, like Jujitsu guy with the hand that chopped. Right, there was the guy that Fisto, horrible name for a hero, kind of his counterpart, Choppy guy, Choppy Jujitsu guy. Okay, moving on. Okay, so my two favorite reads this week. These kind of hold the title right here, and I really try not to say, hey, you need to go read this, even though I've done it a few times. There's always an exception to the rules, right? And this is I'm calling this my exception this week. If you haven't jumped on board with Monarch yet, go get this comic book, especially if you're a reader of comic books. I think you will like this. This took a very weird twist already in issue 2, and I kind of want to see where this goes. So if you remember in issue 1, we had an alien attack. Trevon here is kind of lives in an area. He's in a foster parents type of house, and we just kind of assume that something happened to his parents. What we didn't realize is the aliens didn't kidnap him to transform him into anything or do experiments on him. They were just bringing him home because he's an alien. This is his race of people, and they're just putting him back to the way he should be. They planted him here on Earth, and this nice lady found him and took him in. And we're just using the word foster parent loosely now. But the relationships and everything that he's developed are real. They even did their best to inject him with the DNA or something along those lines. The whole point of him being there is kind of being the precursor to see how society acts and treats, which the aliens are not very impressed with, because their impression of us here on Earth is that we're all heroin addicts. They've highlighted that a lot in here. People doing heroin and self-medicating and things along those lines, and how we're just not a great species to begin with, because like us on our planet where we all got along and everything was super duper stellar between us, but since Earthlings aren't, we'll just kill all of you. Does anybody see the hypocrisy in that? I hope they point that out in the comic book. Weird. So, yeah, but his relationships and everything are weird, and he doesn't have much knowledge of his home world, if you will. Kind of like a Clark Kent, if you will. Just in a very urban setting. Which I like that, too. I think this brings on a very, very good story. And it's heartfelt, too. Like, you already get the feelings on this. So, yeah, Monarch's good read. If you can get this, issues 1 and 2, it's not too late. I'm going to throw this on one of those very rare, you need to read it things. Right? Next, one that I picked up, and I didn't realize how much of how much news this had made in certain corners of the comic book community. But it's called No One, and this is kind of like a true crime type of thing, just not being a true crime. Apparently we have a visual ante. We've had a mass murderer. There's some political stuff going on at the same time. There's a rookie reporter that's kind of following the scenes, and copycat killers, and a rich, influential family, and probably somebody being accused of a crime that they didn't really do, all wrapped around a mass visual ante trying to save his city. All of that crammed into this relatively thick comic book that went by surprisingly fast. And I mean, it is it's not like just a bunch of 2-panel pages going all the way through it. Like, they legit did this thing up, and I really like this is interesting. I believe there's something called the Massive Verse out there now that Image has been kind of creating, and even a podcast associated with this whole massive verse thing. So I didn't realize it was doing all that. I just picked up a comic book and I was like, this reads like a volume 2, and then found all this other stuff. And I was like, okay, we're doing a thing like Marvel and DC, granted, but this is a lot grittier. And that says a lot for DC. Like, this is grittier. So yeah, I would jump on board with this. In order for me to review that, I would have to do a whole separate show by itself because so much is going on in it, and you really feel like you got your money's worth out of it. So yeah, another one that I'm gonna say, even though I don't recommend comic books, which makes me a liar now, I'm recommending this hard. Okay, so what's going on? So I am leaving for Planet Con tomorrow morning. I will be arriving around 12:30. I'm going to be on the con floor and around and about in town. I'm super excited to see all my YouTube creators out there and people that watch the show. So please, if you see me be bopping around, don't think, oh, I can't talk to him or, leave him alone. No, you come talk to me. I talk to people. That's what I do. And, of course, if you want an evil layer patch, definitely just let me know. I'm going to have a bunch of them with me. Hopefully enough. I don't know. And I don't know. Maybe we'll have some NFC chip fun while I'm there. All right, guys. I got to get out of here. I got to pack. And I think my wife wants me to cut the grass before I go. So definitely let me know if you're going to be at Planet Comic Con. Let me know what you think about the episode today or any of the comic books that you read. Always comment down below. And don't forget, there's a like and subscribe and even a little ring where you can ding the channel. And I hope to see you. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.